Welcome to another episode of Remember the Great Sports. Today I'm shooting this video, my favorite band of all time, and the recent passing of Eddie Van Halen. Van Halen music has impacted my life in so many ways. It pretty much is the soundtrack of my young adult / childhood. And this is the first, I've shared this in other videos. You're going to see a lot of items that have been shared already in some previous videos, and you're going to see some items, my CD collection in particular, that I haven't shared yet. But I was roughly 5 or 6 years old when I first heard this album. My uncle owned a copy of this tape. I remember him playing it for me, and I just fell in love with Van Halen. And that let me discover the music that they previously had, prior to 1984, which is the name of the album, and everything that came out after that, so to speak. I pretty much have almost everything. I want to say almost with an asterisk because I may be missing an item or two. I definitely do not have the most recent album that Van Halen released a few years back. I just never got around to purchasing it. To be honest, I wasn't a big fan of that album, so I never went out of my way to pick it up, so to speak. And I've always keep my eyes open for it, in the CD bins or stuff like that at flea market. But what I do want to do is I at least want to show you the Van Halen music collection that I own. And some of these albums and songs I own in multiple capacities, whether it's on cassette tape, whether it's on vinyl, whether it's on CD, or just simply as a music file on my player, on my iPhone or whatever. I like to say that I have a quite nice collection of Van Halen songs. I also have the Twister soundtrack, but I decided not to pull that out because honestly I couldn't find it at the moment. So they're on my player, but I'm not going to share that with you. I'm going to take 1984 off the screen here, and I'm going to show you the first. And believe it or not, I don't have the first album on anything but CD. So I picked this up a while back. This is the first album, Van Halen. I've had this CD in my collection for years. The copyright is 1979. And as many of you know, commercially, CDs weren't around in 79, but this is the first album that they created, and this CD has been in my collection for a long time. The follow-up to that is Van Halen II, and I actually own that on vinyl, which is kind of nice. I picked this up, many years ago, for a couple bucks or whatever, and the condition isn't great, but I always loved the back photo of the band just rocking out, and David Lee Roth doing his, I don't even know what that's called, but signature jump, I guess. And then there's Eddie, playing the guitar, and Michael Anthony and Alex on the drums. But this is the second album from their series, and to be honest with you, I enjoy, the first one more than probably the second one. So after Van Halen 2, they released another album the following year, and that was Women and Children First, which was the first, I guess, titled album without Van Halen or Van Halen 2 in it. Then the following year, they came out with Fair Warning and then Diver Down, which are excellent. I picked these tapes up relatively cheap, 50 cents to $1 way back when. Then, of course, came 1984, which we discussed already. I only have a cassette version of 1984, but that's one of those albums, if I ever see it for $1, I definitely will buy it in the bin. Well, after 1984, many know that David Lee Roth left the band, and that's what brought us 5150, which is the first appearance of Sammy Hagar with Van Halen. I also have the CD from that album as well. And this is when the Van Halen sound kind of took a different turn and direction. And I'm not going to say positive or negative things, because there's a lot of people that support Sammy Hagar's music with Van Halen, and there's a lot of people on the David Lee Roth side of Van Halen. I'm one of those people in particular. I like it all. I have no side to choose. I just have really enjoyed almost everything that Van Halen was ever released, and that includes even with Gary Cherone as the front man, and we'll talk about him in a second. So, after that album came out, you had OU812, which had a couple good songs on it, and wasn't the best album that they ever released, to be honest with you, but again, it has some pretty good songs, and I upgraded again to the CD version of that as well. So the next album came out, and I'll just let you read what that says. For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, and if you put the first letter of each of those words together, that was kind of their little joke that they put on this album. And this album was pretty good. It was a different sound, and this album, I could have swore I had the CD for that, and I think I do. For some reason, it's not with my CDs, but I know I have this CD as well. And this was probably one of their biggest songs, if not their biggest songs, under Sammy Hagar. And this album featured Right Now. And if you grew up in the early 90s, you knew the song Right Now. It was on commercials, like I remember specifically Pepsi Clear used it as their advertisement song during their commercials. I also remember that the video, had a lot of messages within the video. And the song is just so excellent. If I were to point and say, hey, if you want to listen to Van Halen and pick up an album, just an album on its own with Sammy Hagar, this is the one you need to listen to. Because outside of Right Now, there are a couple other good songs on there, but this is the one with Sammy Hagar that you definitely must own if you're a Van Halen fan. A few years later, they came out with Balance. Balance was a pretty good CD. They, came out with Can't Stop Loving You, which was a hit in the 1990s. Probably after Right Now, I would say that's probably the second biggest song in the 90s that they came out with. And when they were, of course, promoting, I believe, the Right Now album, here is a copy of, and this is, whoops. Okay. So this is a copy of their live recordings, and I actually picked that up as well on CD. So I don't know if I only have one of two CDs or whatever it is, but I don't listen to that one all that often, so not a big deal. But it's kind of a neat live concert album to listen to, kind of neat to listen to, with Right Now, live, that type of thing. Then finally, after Sammy Hagar's departure from the band, Van Halen came out with a new sound, with a new frontman, Gary Cherone, and that brought us the album Van Halen III, which I actually had the cassette before I had the CD. I picked up the cassette way back in the 90s, and then I picked up the CD probably, 5 or 6 years ago at a yard sale or something. But this is kind of a change in the Van Halen sound. Obviously with a different frontman, just like when they transitioned from David Lee Roth to Sammy Hagar. The transition to Gary Cherone wasn't so great, to say the least. However, there are some excellent songs on this album if you really want to give it a chance. A lot of people just dismiss it. It's kind of like Rocky V in the Rocky movies. A lot of people just act like that Van Halen III album didn't happen. However, I still enjoy some tracks off of that disc, and I think it's a great, CD to have in your collection that supplements the next few albums I'm going to show you, because they don't include those on these albums. Now, also back in the 1990s, kind of when they were in hiatus with Gary Cherone, Sammy Hagar, etc., they came out with my essential listening to the Van Halen collection, and that is Van Halen Best of Volume 1. Well, They never did another Volume 2 in this series, but they did do a different Greatest Hits CD. But this CD basically encapsulates the first half as all, the first 8 songs as David Lee Roth songs. Then the following, I want to say, 7 to 8 have Sammy Hagar tracks, which the last 2 are new releases. They hadn't been released. These were unreleased recordings at the time. It also includes Humans Being, which is the song off the Twister soundtrack. However, like I mentioned, there are some guitar solos by Eddie on the Twister soundtrack that are excellent, so I definitely recommend picking that up if you don't have it. But this came out, and I actually own a couple copies of this. And this CD right here, the other copy that I own, sits next to my computer at all times. Whenever I'm editing videos, some of the videos that you watch right here on my channel, I pop this CD in, and this is my listening music at my PC quite often. So when I heard about the death of Eddie, I immediately put this in, and I kind of had my own flood of memories come back to me as I listened to this CD for a couple days straight, basically. Now finally, if you want to look at all this pile of stuff that I have here, back in the early 2000s, I want to say, they came out with yet another Greatest Hits album. And this album is almost essential. If you want to listen to Van Halen and kind of capture all of these albums in one, with the exception of the Gary Cherone album, this is the album for you. This 2-disc set has, let's see, 36 songs. And it has a mix of the David Lee Roth and the Sammy Hagar songs. So a lot of the songs that are on this, if not all the songs that are on this, are right here in all this collection that I have. So if you were today starting a CD collection and you needed to buy something Van Halen, this is the CD to buy, because you kind of cover all your bases with this one 2-disc set album right here, with the exception of the Van Halen III album. Maybe with the passing of Eddie, we'll see another, perhaps, Greatest Hits album come out, and I'll definitely probably pick that up. Again, with the digital age, CDs aren't really made like they used to be. You know, again, this came out in the 2000s when people still bought CDs. So if you're going to look at an essential album to buy, this is the one to buy, the double disc set. Now finally, I picked this up and I showed this in my record video. This is my Van Halen World Tour book, and I'm not really sure what year this is from. It says 1979 there in the corner, but this is just an excellent, and I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see this. A good friend of mine actually borrowed this to make a collage of, yeah, and you can see 8x8 right there, to make a collage of photos for Van Halen, and he actually used this book to make the decorative piece. And there's Eddie right there playing the guitar. But I picked this up for relatively cheap, and my guess is that they probably sold this with this album. That would be my guess. This was kind of a promotional item that they, you know, maybe sold at a concert, or, you know, I'm not really sure. But obviously, being that the two match up pretty closely, I'm guessing this came out probably in the 90s. This is not vintage 1979 or anything like that. So I want to thank you for joining me. I just wanted to share this collection of my Van Halen items. Van Halen is hands down my favorite band of all time. I will miss Eddie Van Halen and his huge contribution to music, because he is such a great performer, and the world of music has lost a really good one. So thanks for joining me for an episode of Remembering Eddie Van Halen. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to throw some comments down below if you enjoyed this video as well.